We are gonna become big, no matter what. Right now, we've swam out way too far to sort of turn back.
Beelzebub, Asmodeus, Satanas, Lucifer, Beelzebub, Beelzebub, Asmodeus, Satanas, Lucifer. You be down on your knees and you cry for
In the internet age, few new metal bands are able to claw their way through the abyss and connect with mainstream audiences, and even fewer achieve the legendary status of elder statesmen like Iron Maiden, Metallica, and Black Sabbath. Many thought the genre itself would die out once those legacy acts were gone. However, in the 2010s, a new group took the world by storm, a band that would quickly gain that coveted superstar status despite their initial anonymity. Led by a young Swedish musician, singer, and songwriter known only as Papa Emeritus, this mysterious group would defy the progression of metal itself, going back to the softer origins of 70s rock and metal, blending overly satanic imagery with infectious pop sensibilities. Against all odds, Papa Emeritus and his nameless ghouls would form the biggest metal and hard rock band of our generation, Ghost.
So Papa Emeritus and his merry band of nameless ghouls poured onto the scene, delivering what were pretty much satanic sermons at live shows.
The reason why we came up with the idea was because we never thought we were going to be a big band. So that seemed like a fantastic idea at the time, because we were going to play 2 shows a year.
With the opening song in here, Conclavi Con Dio, which basically means with nails with God. And they give you a mission statement with the song right off the bat. All of their regalia and their song lyrics are going to be very satanic themed. People were freaked out by them, but they were pretty much going for a horror movie aesthetic. I mean, hell, the album cover is literally just a copy of Salem's Lot. But what shocked metalheads even more is they had a very throwback sound. Instead of trying to sound super heavy and like a black metal band, which they looked like, they were sounding more like 70s hard rock and metal, stuff like Blue Oyster Cult and Black Sabbath, which they get compared to regularly. But that's the unique sound of this band. They have those early doom metal riffs, those great organ keyboards, and of course the vocals, which are much softer than what you'd expect. And he pretty much sounds like a literal ghost, especially on songs like Elizabeth, or as he says in the song, Elizabeth, which is about our good old Elizabeth Bathory, the murderous countess. What's shocking with that unique operatic yet soft vocal style is that he originally did not want to sing at all. Our frontman's actually a guitar player by trade, and he tried to get other Swedish singers such as Messiah from Candlemass or God help you, Mats Levin from Candlemass. So he just said fuck it and became the frontman himself. Now he had been kicking around song ideas, especially for Opus Eponymous, for years before this, and he had several other projects that kind of led to the formation of this sound, with his death metal band Repugnant and his vaudeville melodic sounding group Subvision. And it wasn't until he wrote the main riff for the song Stand By Him that everything started to come together. The dark satanic theme and lyrics immediately identified with that dark heavy doom metal riff, and he obsessed over that song for weeks on end until that chorus came in and the whole thing, the whole picture of Ghost was formed.
Tis the night of the witch tonight, and the vacancy serves for as long as she stands by me.
And there's tons of other classic songs in here that show what the band is best at and known for. Heavy ass riffs and super melodic haunting melodies. You of course have Ritual, Death Knell, which is probably my favorite song on here. I love that chorus, but I just gotta highlight Prime Mover because it perfectly exemplifies the theme of this album, of it being about the birth of evil and impending doom. That is the doomiest damn song on there, especially at the end. They'd be known for releasing cover EPs all the time, but they actually start with a cover song on this album of the Beatles classic Here Comes the Sun, and they absolutely transform it and redefine it. And there was just an evil aura and destiny around this band. The exact day that our main man's brother had died is when they had released demos for this album. And they got signed almost immediately, took over Sweden by storm, becoming the biggest band by the end of this album cycle in Sweden. And they were even nominated for a Swedish Grammy. They won the Breakthrough Band of the Year award at Metal Hammer. And they did Maryland Death Fest as well, and just got a bunch of underground success, including with really famous bands and musicians such as Phil Anselmo and even Metallica.
I'm in their fan club.
Integral to their rise in the United States was the 13 Dates of Doom tour, where they played 13 headlining shows across the United States.
In this day and age, it's very hard for a new metal band to break out like this, and from then on, the theme and progression of the band would go from the birth of evil to evil being in the mainstream.
We wanted to sound like a record from 1978 because it's supposed to sound like a band that accidentally plays metal.
A new Ghost album means a new Ghost frontman. Papa Emeritus I would step down from his duties after his name was found on the Epstein flight logs, and the reins would be handed over to Papa Emeritus II. And his look is slightly different. The face paint looks less cartoony and more sinister in my opinion, and adding to the sinisterness was Papa's staff. Occasionally, Papa Emeritus II would also make appearances without having face paint, and would don dark sunglasses, a suit and tie, instead of his usual extravagant clergy robe, who is known for being a lusty old man, which fits the lore, given the fact that he is Italian.
When time was up for the first guy, they wanted to find a successor in-house. Me, being one of the ministry, obviously rose to the opportunity. Not only because of the carnal rewards of all this, but also because I just happen to love a hard-rocking sexy beat.
One thing you may have noticed about this Ghost album is that it says Ghost BC, which is in contrast to a lot of their other albums, which simply just say Ghost, and the band only refer to themselves as Ghost, they don't call themselves Ghost BC. So why the two names on the two album arts?
Ghost is such a phenomenally common word. They didn't dare to release it as something else, or as that, so they demanded that we had something that added to that.
Another thing to note with this album cover, do Papa's outstretched arms remind you of an Academy Award-winning movie from the 80s? Amadeus, perhaps? Infestissumam is probably the Ghost album that I hear most fans of the band say is actually their least favorite. And you know what? You people are smoking that shit. Secular Haze, which is actually the first song and music video that I ever saw from the band. It's what got me into them. I just remember being really drawn to this like 70s aesthetic of the music video. You know, it had that kind of old school film graininess quality to it. And what I think really helps add to Secular Haze's kind of like old school, old-timey feel is the fact that the song is played in 3/4 time. Now, if you're not a musician, what that means is that essentially it has the feel of a waltz.
You know that the fog is here, omnipresent.
The B-side of this album kicks off with the second single, Year Zero, which I think might actually be the darkest song on the album. It starts off with these menacing choir vocals that are just like chanting the names of different demons. And then when the guitars come in, they sound like they're tuned down to the pits of hell.
Since dawn of time, the fate of man is that of lice.
But overall, I don't think the second half is as strong as the first half. I think Body and Blood is pretty decent, but Idolatrine and Depth of Satan Eyes, if I'm being honest, I think those songs are kind of just filler tracks. But the album closer, Monstrance Clock, might actually be the best song on the album. It's just an ethereal anthem about all of us Ghost fans, metalheads, whatever you want to say, all being united under the banner of Satan.
Come together.
Now, as much as I love this album and I think it turned out great, they actually ran into a lot of issues trying to actually release this album. They actually recorded it in Nashville, Tennessee, and while they were down in Nashville, they had some trouble finding a local choir.
People in general are opposed to that sort of art. In Hollywood, they are not. So it's, we just had to geographically move that part of the recording somewhere else.
Then, they ran into issues trying to find a pressing plant that would be willing to press their albums.
The pressing plants that are used to doing Shania Twain records, and for whatever economical reasons, they are all sort of also in that Tennessee area. So obviously there's going to be some schmuck somewhere that picks up the artwork and say, what the hell?
And they had even more issues when they were trying to print their, I guess you would call it a deluxe sex toy edition of the album, where, when they pitched that idea, the label had some reservations.
And then when they sort of whiffed it out like, oh, well, you're doing dildo? Yes. Oh. Okay, now we have the problem with the choir, we have the problem with this, and you're gonna shove a dildo up this?
So that is Ghost's second album, Infestissumam. An album that many would say is a sophomore slump, but that is a label that I vehemently disagree with. Before recording this album, though, they actually recorded a covers EP being produced by Dave Grohl, of all people, who I believe also played session drums on the album.
If we want to make this work right now, is that we can take a lot of the covers that we intend to record in Nashville and take them to you instead.
This EP has 5 tracks in total, 4 of which are covers, and 1 is a live version of the lead single off the previous album, Secular Haze.
Fundamental criteria is that A, we have to be able to do something with the song that is not, that the original does not possess. I'm not talking about quality, but I'm just saying Waiting for the Night is a perfect example of that, because the original is so sparse. Wow, that song, you could really, if you just play the same song but with an acoustic guitar and play the chords to it, it's actually a more beautiful song rather than an atmospheric song.
Crucified is my favorite track on the album, and it was originally a song by a Swedish dance pop group called Army of Lovers.
I've seen the deepest darkness and wrestled with the gods. I'd hide a noble harness, raiding cats and dogs.
But after Ghost were done cosplaying as their musical inspirations, it was time to get back to business, and it was time to release their breakout album.
We are not your usual satanic band
Yeah.
who tell people to go kill themselves
Yes.
or sacrifice virgins or
Yeah,
kill
no way.
cats or do anything like that. So it's like, it's futile.
At the end of the Infestissumam tour, it was announced on VH1 Classic that Papa Emeritus II was fired from the band after it was found out that he was a fake Italian who was caught putting cream in his carbonara.
Forbidden. No cream in your carbonara. It's forbidden.
He was replaced with his brother, who was a whole 3 months younger than him. Ghost's third sermon, Meliora, Latin for better things, lives up to its name. Meliora adds in a bit of a psychedelic rock and a sci-fi sound based on a moment during the Infestissumam tour where during a rehearsal a nameless ghoul was trying out new guitar gear. They accidentally got a spacey echo effect that made the guitar riff sound futuristic and sci-fi. With the album artwork being based off of the 1927 film Metropolis, though the city depicted on the album cover also kinda reminds me of the city from the 2012 video game Dishonored. This edition plus Klaus Arland, not gonna even pretend I pronounced that correctly, who gave the album a polished sound into something grander and more accessible that leans harder into the melodic hard rock and pop sensibilities while retaining the heft of their metal roots, and it just works. And with that, Ghost clearly were doing something right, because Meliora not only was their breakout album, but to this day, it is their most critically acclaimed album. The opening track, Spirit, starts off with all those sci-fi sounds that I mentioned earlier, to the point where it feels like I accidentally turned on a Doctor Who episode. But once the actual guitar riffs come in, we are off to the races. This song is a slow burn that builds into a triumphant declaration of the album's dystopian future, with lyrics like "throw yourself into the vessel of possibilities," hinting at surrender to a higher, or probably in this case, a lower power. But it's the album's lead single that really put this band on the radar over here in the States. The Grammy Award-winning masterpiece known as Cerise, with one of the most badass guitar riffs in heavy metal. Cerise's Grammy win further elevated their profile, bridging the gap between metal purists and a broader rock audience. While Year Zero was the first Ghost song I'd ever heard, Cerise was the second. You have probably the most divisive track on this album, He Is, which is in the style of Ghost's satirical satanic take on gospel music as a hymn-like ballad. It's a bold risk, but in my opinion, it more than pays off with its emotional depth.
Yeah, for a long time it wasn't called He Is. It had a different name.
Oh, what name was that?
Leia.
Leia?
Leia, which means she is in Italian.
Oh, it used to be about a lady.
Yes.
Now it's about Satan.
Oh, well. Sort of.
More or less.
Yeah.
The band attempted to record it for 2013's Infestissumam, but after trying to get it to sound like Ghost and spending weeks trying to add and subtract elements of the song, they ultimately just kind of gave up and shelved it. Upon starting pre-production for Meliora, however, they added He Is to the list, and after praise from producer Klaus Ahland, recorded it as it was. The experimentation paid off. That's the thing about Meliora. It's Ghost's first real foray into experimentation. It ventures into psychedelic rock and pop to keep the lyrical themes from getting too stale after the first two albums. Hell, there's even the thematic concept of a dystopian world that's particularly referenced in the album closer Deus in Absentia, which paints a vivid picture of a godless apocalypse with its melancholic yet defiant tone. Best song? For me, it's between Cerise and the groovy, bass riff driven, badass, catchy as f*** Pinnacle and the Pits.
It is a long way
Upon release, Meliora received widespread critical acclaim for its songwriting, production, and accessibility. It peaked at number 8 on the Billboard 200, a testament to Ghost's growing mainstream appeal, and went platinum in their native Sweden. Some longtime listeners felt that the poppier elements strayed too far from the rawer edge of Opus Eponymous. Regardless, Meliora is often cited as Ghost's defining work, an opinion I overwhelmingly agree with. And the moment they fully realized their potential as a theatrical rock juggernaut. For newcomers, it's an ideal entry point. For longtime fans, it's a bold step forward that rewards repeated listens.
We have an EP coming out. There's going to be some new material. We're going to have a new stage show.
Man.
So it's going to be a completely different sort of setting.
No kidding.
So then we're gonna terrorize you with that.
Ghost's Popestar EP, released in 2016, is a short but intriguing addition to the band's catalog, clocking in at just 24 minutes, with 5 tracks once again, 4 of them covers, and 1 of them a Ghost original song that would become the opening track to every Ghost concert for the Popestar tour, before becoming the closing song to every Ghost concert afterwards. Square Hammer is the real star here. Catchy, riff-heavy, and dripping with satanic charm. It's one of their most anthemic tracks to date. However, before moving on, we have to talk about the gimmick-ruining elephant in the room in the history of Ghost. Central to their mystique was the anonymity of its members, including the satanic papal frontman, Papa Emeritus. The instrumentalists, collectively dubbed nameless ghouls, wore masks and costumes, concealing their identities as part of the band's enigmatic allure. However, the veil of secrecy was dramatically lifted in 2017 when a lawsuit filed by 4 former members against a man by the name of Tobias Forge not only exposed their own identities, but also confirmed Forge as not only the man behind the Papa Emeritus persona, but also the creative force behind Ghost. These musicians, who had performed as nameless ghouls between 2010 and 2016, accused Forge of withholding their fair share of the band's profits from album releases to extensive world tours. According to their claims, they had operated under an agreement that profits would be shared equally among the members, given their contributions to Ghost's music and live performances. They alleged that Forge, who managed the band's finances through his own companies, provided only minimal advance payments, refusing to disclose detailed financial records or distribute earnings despite the band's growing success. Simon Soderbergh, who had been the lead guitarist known as Alpha since 2010, took the lead in publicizing the group's grievances. In a detailed Facebook statement, he outlined their frustrations, revealing the identity of the 4 litigants. Soderbergh described years of touring, approximately 500 shows, and recording contributions, asserting that the band had been a collaborative effort, not a solo venture. He accused Forge of attempting to transform Ghost into a solo project with hired musicians, a shift underscored by their exclusion from a 2017 US tour after rejecting a contract redefining them as mere consultants. Tobias Forge responded in June of 2017, filing a legal rebuttal that painted a starkly different picture. He argued that no legal partnership had ever existed between him and the former members, asserting that Ghost was his brainchild from its inception in 2006. Forge maintained that the nameless ghouls were musicians for hire, paid fixed salaries to perform his compositions and execute his vision, rather than equal partners entitled to profits. He emphasized that he wrote nearly all of Ghost's music and developed its theatrical concept, with the ghouls serving as interchangeable performers, not irreplaceable collaborators. The Linköping District Court ruled in Forge's favor, dismissing the case. The court found insufficient evidence of a formal partnership, noting that while the musicians had agreed to perform together, this did not inherently constitute a business relationship under Swedish law. Forge's victory reinforced his narrative of Ghost as a solo-driven project. The fallout saw Forge dismiss the entire lineup in late 2016, replacing them with all new ghouls. Critics of the ruling might see it as a dismissal of the collective effort behind Ghost's rise, while supporters could argue that it protected an artist's right to define their creation. The revelation of the band members' identities, while a loss to the band's lore, humanized the nameless ghouls, offering a glimpse into the real people behind the masks, but at the expense of Ghost's entire gimmick. But with Forge pretty much starting an entire new backing band of nameless ghouls, how would they fare from this point onwards?
That's quite a distinguished group that you now belong into, you know, Judas Priest, Iron Maiden, Marilyn Manson, people who have been protested for apparently being satanic. I mean, they're right.
In 2017, at a show in Gothenburg, Sweden, Papa III was pulled off stage for apparently being unfit for the role of Papa. And Papa Emeritus II, or Nihl, took his place, saying, "The Middle Ages begin now." Cardinal Copia was brought in, bastard child of Papa Nihl, a new character in the clergy, Sister Imperator. And Sister Imperator is weird because she always looks different in every appearance she makes. I think she lost weight or something. Good for her. And for the first time ever, a character who didn't share the Papa Emeritus name was the frontman of the band. Tobias wore this more realistic looking mask, and he was a little sillier and more lighthearted of a character. He danced a lot and was considerably more flamboyant, which works for the Prequelle album itself. The music has gotten even more pop with bigger hooks and more radio-friendly production. In fact, some even call it overproduction, but to me it works. Which is funny considering that the album cover pays homage to a not very commercial Sepultura record. The second single, Dance Macabre, ties into the general theme of the record, being the Middle Ages and the Black Death. During the height of the sickness, while people were dropping dead and suffering, the pubs and brothels were bastions of party and dance while everything seemed to crumble around them. And the song has such a joyous feel with hooks that evoke bands like the Scorpions and a rhythm section that reminds me of a lot of disco.
Just wanna be with you in the moonlight.
For some, this is the end of the Ghost they know and love. They believe the former members when they say that they wrote a lot of the music too. And with this album's bigger focus on pop hooks, you can see where that's coming from. They must have been the ones to write all the big heavy riffs, and Tobias must have wrote the actual vocal melodies and lyrics, which is why this album sounds so different. But I disagree. While this album sounds different, it doesn't sound entirely new band different. There's plenty of examples when other bands and artists totally change their sound, even when every member or even collaborator stays the same. At the end of the day, we'll never really know exactly what happened because we weren't there. But there's context clues. They lost a court case, and we have one of the band's all-time heaviest songs on this record called Faith. So sometimes Occam's razor is a decent school of thought when it comes to these things. And Faith proves that Tobias can get heavy all on his own. He even plays all the lead guitar on this track, including all the solos. The riffs are churning and chugging, and it gets really doomy in the pre-chorus. The lyrics are even kind of about his former bandmates, with lyrics like, "A pack of fools can take the stand." And in the chorus he sings of watching them fall. Considering they not only lost the case, but they then had to pay Tobias' legal fees, and then Ghost became even more successful in the aftermath, revenge is a dish best served cold. Rats. An anthem written as an up-tempo opener for both the album and concerts. Inspired by the Aussie classic I Don't Know from Blizzard of Oz. It's about the spread of the disease, but subtextually, it's about the quick spread of harmful and false rhetoric. And rats, as many know, were historically blamed for the spread of the plague. But nowadays, scientists believe that it was humans themselves who actually spread it, considering how fast the disease took a chokehold of Europe. My favorite track is See the Light. It's a slower track that features a lot of piano, but grows to such great scope in the chorus. Hell, there's even full-blown 80s sounding synth in the bridge. The lyrics play with and pervert Christian ideology with the Eucharist, but it also touches on the lawsuit. And Tobias has even outright admitted to it being about his former bandmates. The instrumental, Miasma, has an amazing sounding saxophone solo that works with the big guitars and 80s style synths way better than it frankly should. Papa Nihl would even come out on stage during that song live to play the saxophone, and it was awesome. Pro Memoria is a cheesy ballad that sounds a little Broadway. The lyrics about not fearing death and embracing the idea that you'll die one day, but not in a sad way. It sounds almost triumphant. Tobias has always loved the arena rock of bands like Kiss and Queen and the pop hooks of bands like The Cars and Cheap Trick. This is just him truly embracing them while keeping his identity and musical integrity. Hell, by this point the band has already covered acts such as ABBA and Depeche Mode. Are we really surprised that he made an album like this? If anything, I'm surprised it took him this long. And I think it's a great album to start with, if you love any of the bands I just mentioned.
Sister, what do you think about a re-release for the 50th anniversary? I'm really pushing it, aren't I?
A little while later we saw a re-release of an album called 7 Inches of Satanic Panic, which saw Papa Emeritus Nihl as the frontman of the band way back in the 60s with a more psychedelic sound, as you can see here for the video for Kiss the Go-Goats. It shows Papa Nihl with a mop top. I mean, the whole band looked like a mix between Alice Cooper and Steppenwolf. I mean, it's still Ghost, the psychedelic stuff is more of a flavor, but it's still really neat if you're a psych rock fan. Marion Across, the B-side, randomly came a big hit in 2022 thanks to TikTok. It's now by far the band's biggest song with almost 1 billion streams on Spotify alone. It's a love song of sorts that plays with the lore of Sister Imperator and Papa Nihl once being together. There's incredibly sacrilegious lyrics, maybe their most sacrilegious yet, with the double meanings of Mother Mary, her being on the cross, and the lyrics like, "You go down just like Holy Mary." I love the videos they recently released for both this song and a newer song, The Future is a Foreign Land. They're animated like an old school Hanna-Barbera cartoon from the 60s. It's kind of Tobias giving a nod and a wink to the long-running meme of calling Ghost Scooby-Doo chase music. I wonder when the people who still make these jokes will eventually graduate to jokes about airline food. The song once again got them in some hot water with conservative Christian talking heads like failed actor Michael Knowles. It's funny how the people who champion freedom of expression the most are oftentimes the first to tell people to stop doing things that they don't like. Let's see how the band will continue to piss people off.
The idea of making a record about empires came in 2014. But my interest in it has been for as long as I can remember. And now, when it came time to write the record, it was just opening your eyes every day to another day of madness. And then it was very easy to be inspired.
At the final date of the Prequelle tour, called A Final Gig Named Death in Mexico City, Papa Nihl died on stage after performing Miasma. So without a Papa, Cardinal Copia was promoted to the role of Papa Emeritus IV, and he just became a bit too much at this point in my opinion. He just played the rock star character too much for my liking.
Take care now. I love you. I like you.
And that comes into play with the album itself, but thankfully not in a way that gets under my skin. It's much more arena rock, but it's still heavy with hooks like Prequelle, but the guitars are much more prominent in the mix and the arrangements. Thanks to Fredrik Oxen from Opeth, who handles, as far as I can tell, all the guitars on this album, and he kills it. The first single came out like 6 months before the record in conjunction with the not very good Halloween Kills, and this video sucks too. It's like some art school dropout made it. It looks closer to The Woman in Black with its wannabe gothic horror than Halloween. It would have been so easy to make a good Ghost/Halloween music video. Just have Papa 4 stalking the cast of Halloween Kills, have Jamie Lee Curtis in there somewhere, and you're golden. Or if you really want to be lazy, just have generic footage of the band performing with clips from the movie interspliced within it. I'm getting far too worked up over this. But the song Hunter's Moon feels like a good middle ground between Prequelle and something a bit heavier. It's got the synths and a lot of melody, but the guitars are just as prominent as the synths, and there's a lot of nasty riffs like in the bridge, along with the spooky backing vocals that add to this killer atmosphere. It's much better than that waste of space of a movie, that's for sure.
It's a hunter's
This time around, it's about the rise and fall of empires. It's in the name, Impera. It's Latin for words like command and power. Tobias was influenced to write about the subject after reading the book The Rule of Empires by Timothy Persons years prior. The album cover is a homage of sorts to this very iconic picture of Aleister Crowley, a man with his own empire when you think about it. But this album's lyrics aren't just about ancient history like Prequelle. They actually touch on the then current state of politics. Tobias told Loudwire, fortunately, if you look throughout history, there's a natural cycle where our society is built up, and then it's sort of perfected, and then it usually falls apart. One of the songs is pretty much all but confirmed to be about the then, at the time of writing, but also the now, also current president.
Don't know, I've gone cross-eyed.
You know, that guy. 20s on the surface is about robber barons and the corporate fat cats in the 1920s, but subtextually, it's very much about him. The song is a rallying cry from a con man. To quote Tobias, it promises only air, but poisoned air. The song itself is weird. Tobias's vocals are almost wrapped in the verses. The backing vocals sound like steam escaping a teapot. The riff sounds like something Slayer would do. It's by far the most hated in this album, but I kinda love it. It's so bizarre, but I can't help but really enjoy it. Griftwood is honestly maybe my favorite off the album. Like 20s, which was pretty much about Trump, this song's pretty much about his then VP, Mike Pence. To once again quote Tobias, he tries to tell the world that he serves God, that he's part of the good side. Whereas at the end of the day, the only thing he wants is power. I mean, it's in the title. Griftwood. Watcher in the Sky is the heaviest this album has to offer. It's got one hell of a chug. Vibe-wise, reminds me of Opus Eponymous, but with a lighter chorus and a truly majestic bridge and solo section. It sounds like something from a monster movie. Spillways has an intro that apes ABBA. Joe Elliott himself sang on a version of the song, and it's not that different at all. He sings on a single verse and some backing vocals, and you can honestly barely tell. It's pretty damn pointless. I feel like they only did this to show that their graphic designer can copy the Def Leppard fonts. Look, I can do it too, guys. It's not that impressive. Call Me Little Sunshine is the most popular song of the record. It has this menacing vibe, but at the same time, it's kind of uplifting. It's the devil speaking to someone who's lonely or at risk or just vulnerable. The quote, "Call Me Little Sunshine," comes from Crowley himself, and the song definitely makes sense coming from a cult leader.
Little sunshine, call me
In a lot of ways, it's better than Prequelle, even though it's a tad top-heavy compared to it, but with a bigger focus on guitars and riffs, yet still more hooks than a Hellraiser movie. This is a record that bridges the gap in their fan base. So if you fell off this band after Prequelle, then maybe this one will be more your speed. As par for the Ghost chorus, after this they released another EP, though for the first time in their history, Pantomime is all covers. If you ask me, it's pretty good, but with the lack of any original cuts, it feels inessential. There's also some weird choices to cover, like The Stranglers, Television, and Tina Turner. Surprisingly, they actually work well enough. The cover of Iron Maiden's Phantom of the Opera is a tad middling. I would have rathered another oddball choice of cover like the lead single from this EP, Jesus He Knows Me by Genesis. And take it from me, someone who hates Genesis. Well, mainly Phil Collins, but still. I actually really dig this cover. Tobias said he picked it to cover because it felt more relevant now than ever. And given the attacks he and the band have endured thanks to Christian fundamentalists, I can see why. Though I also said that this EP's theme was inspired by personality politics and Trump, he does know that these are all covers, right? We then got the theatrical concert film, Right Here, Right Now, and it's pretty damn cool. The direction, editing, and cinematography are all top-notch, much better than a usual pro-shot concert DVD. The performances are fantastic. The storyline stuff is neat, but when it cuts into the songs themselves, that pisses me off. And God, Tobias as Papa IV just never seems to shut up. I was told prior to seeing this myself that it was bad, and at first I didn't think it was too awful, but as it went on it got worse and worse. Some things are kind of funny, like when he's haggling with the audience about how many more songs he'll play after an encore, but then there's painful stuff like his assistants coming out to change his shoes and whatnot, these awful jokes, pastiches on frontmen like David Lee Roth and Paul Stanley. They could have at least played a few more songs instead of all this. And he also says this right before the last chorus of Square Hammer. I'm not gonna lie, he kind of ruins it. His overall vibe is a bit too Rocky Horror Picture Show, and I love Rocky Horror, and I know ghosts have always been campy, but at a certain point it goes too far. Overall, I think it's worth your time if you're a fan, but just make sure you have the fast forward button on your remote handy. At the end of the film, Sister Imperator dies, and instead of getting whacked like all the papas prior to him, Papa IV is promoted to Frata Imperator, the new brains behind the clergy. But who's gonna be the next Papa?
Because the previous record, Impera, was quite heavily reflecting on society and structural external elements. That is not what I want, that's not what I need, and that is not what people that are keen on hearing what I think needs. I wanted to make a record that was about core human sentiments that will be there forever.
Papa IV, formerly Cardinal Copia, their longest running frontman. And for all of his hard work, how did this band reward him? They gave him a desk job. This time we get his fraternal twin brother, Papa V Perpetua, or Papa V Perpetua. His look is a combination of dark and gothic, but also kind of glitzy and shimmery. Once you remove that faceplate, I believe we just have Tobias just wearing makeup. We've never seen that before. We don't know much about his personality yet because, well, he was just introduced. In fact, he was introduced, I believe, at the end of their first single, Satanized. Impera, huge, massive sounding album. It had big, bombastic energy. The guitars were huge. Everything about it was just kind of out front, in your face. Now, once again, we had Andy Wallace at the helm here, and we got some decidedly different results. This is more of a throwback to like 80s production. Like, you listen to the drums, they kind of have that 80s canned drum sound. You listen to the guitars have a more 80s metal, hard rock sort of vibe, like they're a little bit grittier sounding. You have big 80s heavy metal rockers like Meliora, Amori, Umbra with its giant cowbell in it and very Phil Collins-esque sort of drum beat. And of course their second single, Lacrima, which, I mean, you just listen to it for a second and you're gonna hear like a more gothic tinged Ozzy Osbourne. This album really centers on big hooks, but with this production, it feels more genuine. Like, this really does sound like an 80s album. Right away, the opening track, Peacefield, it has a big vocal build-up in the beginning, and it starts kind of, you know, gaining momentum, and by the time you get down to the pre-chorus and chorus, which I love the fact that there are pre-choruses on this album, honestly, and I'm not even a big fan of Journey, but I heard Journey. I kind of heard almost like a clever nod to Separate Ways. Meliora Amori, which does translate to Love Rockets, which they repeat a lot in that chorus. It's like a combination of Def Leppard and Scorpions. It's got a little bit of that 80s sleaze to it, and admittedly some very sexually charged lyrics for someone that's in the clergy, technically. This did not have as much external help as Impera. In fact, Impera had a lot of additional songwriting credits from people outside of the band. And this kind of circles back to the whole 80s pop thing. 80s pop, you know, I feel as though is like probably one of the strongest eras of pop in general, because you had a lot of like really talented songwriters, you know, in there, and they were willing to try a lot of different stuff and experiment a little bit more. I'm not gonna say Ghost is the heaviest band out there. They're clearly not. In fact, I'll go as far as to say that when I want to listen to Ghost, it's not because I want to listen to metal, it's because I want to listen to catchy songs in general. This feels a little bit more subdued, like this should have popped up between Meliora and Prequelle. Yeah, the imagery's fun, the lore is great, but ultimately we want good songs. We want memorable songs, and this band excels at writing songs that just generate earworms. And me being a child of the 80s, because I'm probably the oldest person on this video, there is an element of nostalgia to this. This band gets a lot of shit, but I like the fact that this band is, you know, drawing people in. And you know what? I'm all for fun gateway bands, and this is way better than people like listening to Five Finger Death Punch or any horse shit like that. Unashamedly, I've seen them live multiple times. I will probably see them live again. I don't know about the whole no cell phone thing because, yeah, I'm sure they don't want like footage of the band being all over YouTube or people snapping pictures, but at the same time, it's also a phone, and, you know, if you need to get a hold of someone, you should probably have your phone on, like, just in case of emergencies and shit. So is this the last Ghost album? Is this the last version of Papa we'll see? I don't know.
While Tobias has referred to Ghost as a gimmick band, and their mythology has been a major factor in their appeal and staying power, the Swedish frontman has also stated that the band's lore will be ending soon. But what that means for their music is unclear, so exactly what the future holds for Ghost is still to be determined.
Take care now. I love you. I like you.
Subscribe to the Downfall Network.
No!